You know, people look at me and they see the success story. They see the movies, the awards, the applause. They see the man on the red carpet, the speeches, the photographs with the president, the magazine covers with my name in bold letters. They see a life that seems complete, a man who's made it. And for a long time, I thought that too. I thought that if I just kept working harder, earning more, collecting more trophies, I'd finally feel full inside. But what I didn't know back then was that you can be standing in the brightest light and still feel completely lost in the dark. I remember walking off stage one night after a standing ovation. The crowd was roaring, cameras flashing, people shouting my name like I was something more than human. I smiled, waved, said thank you, the usual. But when I got back to my dressing room, it was quiet, just me and the sound of my own breathing. I sat there staring at my reflection in the mirror, the same mirror that had seen me transform into dozens of characters. And I remember thinking, who am I when the lights go out? I had everything a man could ask for a career: money, recognition, respect, but none of it filled that quiet ache I carried inside. It was like standing at the top of a mountain and realizing there's nowhere left to climb, only the wind and the echo of your own emptiness. People would tell me how blessed I was, how lucky, how inspirational, and I'd smile and nod. But deep down, I knew something was missing, something I couldn't name. There's a kind of loneliness that comes with fame that most people don't talk about. It's not about being alone. I was always surrounded by people, assistants, producers, managers, interviewers. Everyone wanted a piece of Morgan Freeman, but no one really wanted me. No one wanted the man behind the name. The truth is, I'd become a character in my own life, scripted, polished, always performing, even off camera. And yet, no matter how well I played the role, it never brought peace. There's a difference between being admired and being known, and I was admired by millions, but known by almost no one, not even myself. Sometimes, in the middle of a crowded event, I'd catch myself thinking, is this it? Is this what I've worked my whole life for? It was a dangerous thought because once you ask that question, you can't unhear it. It follows you home. It sits beside you at night. Looking back, I can see it clearly. I was chasing validation, not purpose. I was building an empire on applause, but applause fades. And when it did, all that was left was me and the silence. So I asked myself, if I have everything the world says I should want, then why do I feel so empty? That was the beginning, the first crack in the illusion, the first whisper of truth. I didn't know it then, but that question would change everything. You know, when life starts to fall apart, it doesn't happen all at once. It's not like the movies where the music swells and the hero loses everything in one dramatic scene. No, it's slower, quieter. One piece at a time, things begin to slip through your fingers until you look down and realize your hands are empty. For me, it started with small cracks in the foundation. A project I believed in failed. A friendship I thought was real ended with silence. People I trusted, people I had helped, started disappearing when I needed them the most. And before I knew it, the man who once walked through crowds of admirers was standing alone in a room that suddenly felt too big. The same people who had cheered for me began to whisper behind my back. The same industry that once called me a legend now questioned my choices, my relevance, my worth. That's the price of fame. The applause turns into echoes, and the echoes fade. The higher you climb, the harder the fall when it comes. I tried to hold it all together. I told myself, you've been through worse, Morgan. You can fix this. So I worked harder, stayed busy, filled every hour with something. But no matter how much I did, things kept slipping away. Every success felt smaller. Every setback hit harder. I was fighting battles I didn't even understand anymore. Then came the betrayal, the one that cuts the deepest. Someone I trusted completely, someone I considered family, turned on me. I won't name names because it's not about revenge. But that moment broke something inside me. It wasn't the money or the project or the headlines that followed. It was the realization that trust, something I'd built my whole life on, could vanish just like that. Suddenly, I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating right. I'd sit alone at night, staring at the city lights outside my window, wondering how I'd lost control of my own life. My phone still rang, but not with the same warmth. The calls were transactional, polite, calculated. The laughter was gone. The love was gone. You start to see people differently when you're at your lowest. You realize who was standing next to you because of who you were and who's willing to stay when you have nothing left to offer. And when you finally see that truth, it hurts. It really hurts. I remember thinking, so this is it? This is what all those years of work were for? To end up here alone, misunderstood, and exhausted? It's funny the world tells you success will protect you, but it doesn't. Fame doesn't cushion the fall. It just makes the impact louder. That was the season when I stopped pretending everything was fine. The mask started to crack. The man the world thought they knew, confident, strong, untouchable, was breaking apart inside. And in that breaking, I learned something I'd never understood before. When you lose everything, you finally see what you really have. And most of the time, it's not much except the truth. When everything went quiet, that's when the noise inside me got the loudest. I tried to drown it out with everything I could find: work, distractions, late nights, applause, even the kind of company that only makes the loneliness worse when they leave. I thought if I just stayed busy, I wouldn't have to feel, I wouldn't have to think. But emptiness has a way of finding you no matter how fast you run. There was a point where I started believing my own disguise, the confident man, the professional, the guy who always had it under control. But when the camera stopped rolling, when the lights went out, I'd come home to silence. Just me, my thoughts, and a feeling I couldn't shake that everything I had built was sitting on sand. People around me didn't see it. They saw the smile, the polished interviews, the speeches that sounded wise. They didn't see the man who sat awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering if his life still meant anything. I'd ask myself, is this all there is? Is this what I've traded my peace for? I tried everything to fill the hole: success, validation, comfort, distraction. I tell myself, you've just got to keep going, Morgan. Push through. But the harder I pushed, the deeper the hole became. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream, it whispers. It sits quietly in your chest and reminds you that something is missing. And then one night, it all came crashing down. There was no big event, no tragedy, no headline, just a moment of brutal honesty. I was sitting alone in my home, lights off, just darkness and silence. For the first time in a long time, I didn't reach for my phone, didn't turn on the TV, didn't call anyone. I just sat there and I broke. I cried, not the kind of tears that come from frustration, but the kind that come from finally admitting you're lost. I cried because I realized how far I'd drifted from who I was, because somewhere along the way, I'd stopped living and started performing even when no one was watching. That night, I stopped pretending. I said out loud, I don't know who I am anymore. And as strange as it sounds, that admission was the first honest thing I'd said in years. See, we think the worst thing that can happen is losing everything, the career, the money, the respect. But it's not. The worst thing is losing your sense of meaning, losing yourself in the noise of everything you thought mattered. That night didn't fix me. It didn't give me peace, but it stripped away the illusion. It forced me to face the truth. I wasn't broken because I'd failed. I was broken because I'd forgotten what I was living for. And when you finally reach that point when there's nowhere left to run, that's when something new begins. That's when the soul finally whispers, now that you've stopped pretending, are you ready to be real? I remember the night it happened. It wasn't loud. There were no angels in the sky, no thunder, no lightning, just silence. And for the first time in a long time, that silence didn't scare me. It felt full somehow, like something was waiting inside it. I had hit the wall, emotionally, spiritually, everything. I had nothing left to give, not to the world, not even to myself. I was tired of pretending, tired of chasing things that didn't fill me. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed. It wasn't a fancy prayer. There were no perfect words, just me, sitting in the dark, whispering, God, if you're real, I can't do this alone anymore. And something changed. I didn't see a vision, didn't hear a voice from above, but I felt something, a peace that didn't make sense, a warmth that wrapped around my chest and steadied my breath. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I can't explain it any other way. It was like the darkness lifted just enough for me to see the outline of hope. A few days later, a friend, one I hadn't spoken to in years, called me out of nowhere. He said, Morgan, I don't know why, but I felt like I had to reach out. How are you? And right there, I broke. I told him everything, the emptiness, the exhaustion, the feeling that I was losing myself. He didn't judge. He just listened. Then he said something that stuck with me. Maybe what's breaking you isn't meant to destroy you. Maybe it's meant to rebuild you. That night, he gave me a Bible. I remember looking at it like it was a stranger. I had seen one before, of course, but I'd never really opened it. I thought faith was something you did on Sundays, not something that changed how you breathe, how you live, how you see the world. But I started reading, slowly at first, a few pages here, a few verses there, and somewhere in those words and the stories of forgiveness, mercy, and sacrifice, I found myself crying again. Not from pain this time, but from recognition. It was as if those pages were reading me. I read about grace, about how love isn't earned, about how surrender isn't weakness. And for the first time, I understood strength isn't holding on. Strength is letting go. Every day after that, I started to notice small things. A sunrise that felt different. A stranger's kindness that moved me more than it should have. The sound of laughter, real laughter, something I hadn't heard from my own mouth in months. It was like my soul was waking up. And that's when I realized I hadn't found God in a church. I found him in my darkness. I found him in my breaking. I found him when I finally stopped running. I used to think faith was for people who needed help, but now I know faith is for people who finally admit they can't do it alone. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to find what was carrying you all along. The moment I truly decided to change wasn't loud or dramatic. There was no big announcement, no press conference, no turning point that made the headlines. It was quiet. It was just me, sitting with myself, realizing that the life I'd been living no longer fit the person I was becoming. For years, I had built my life around achievement, around being the man, the professional, the one who could handle anything. But after everything that happened, after I hit that wall, after I found that flicker of faith in the dark, I knew something had to give. I couldn't keep living halfway, half in truth, half in performance. I had to make a choice. And that choice scared me. Because choosing faith meant letting go of everything I'd spent my life trying to control. It meant walking away from some of the very things that had defined me, the applause, the expectations, the image. It meant losing people who no longer understood me. Some called it weakness. Others said I'd lost my edge. Maybe I had. But what they didn't understand was that losing my edge was how I found my peace. I remember the day I turned down a major project, the kind of role that would have made headlines. It wasn't about money or fame. It was about what the story stood for. Something inside me said, if you go back to that kind of world, you'll lose what God just gave you. So I walked away. My agent thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I did, but I'd rather lose my mind in truth than keep it in lies. See, when you decide to live differently, the world doesn't applaud you. It questions you. It laughs at you. It tries to remind you of who you used to be. But I wasn't that man anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to stay aligned with the voice that had pulled me out of the darkness. People asked, why trade comfort for conviction? And I'd say, because conviction lasts longer. Comfort fades, applause fades, but conviction, that's what keeps you steady when the storm comes back around. Faith doesn't mean the road gets easier. It means you finally know why you're walking it. I lost a few friends. Some doors closed. But every door that closed made room for something real, for peace, for purpose, for relationships that weren't built on what I could give, but who I truly was. These days, when I wake up, I don't chase the world anymore. I start my day with gratitude, with prayer. I ask for strength, not success, for wisdom, not recognition. And somehow, that fills me more than any award ever could. People see me now and say, Morgan, you've changed. And I tell them, no, I've finally become who I was supposed to be. I used to think losing everything was the worst thing that could happen. But now I know if you keep your soul, you haven't lost a thing. Because what I found on the other side of surrender wasn't emptiness, it was freedom. Peace didn't come overnight. It wasn't some magical transformation where suddenly everything felt easy. No, peace came slow, like the sunrise. At first, just a faint light on the horizon. Then, over time, warmth began to touch the corners of my life again. For the first time in years, I started waking up without dread. I didn't check my phone to see what the world thought of me. I didn't need to. The noise had finally quieted. I began to find joy in small things, the sound of the wind, the laughter of my family, the stillness before prayer. It's funny how when you stop chasing everything, you finally start noticing what's been around you all along. I spent more time at home, less on red carpets, more time listening than talking. I started praying every morning, not for success, not for fame, but for wisdom, patience, and gratitude. That became my routine. And as simple as it sounds, it changed everything. I learned how to be thankful for what I already had. You see, when you've lost almost everything, gratitude becomes a form of strength. I thank God for the people who stayed when the applause stopped, for the air in my lungs, for another day to try again. And little by little, that gratitude rebuilt me. My relationships changed too. I started reaching out to people I'd neglected, family, old friends. I apologized where I needed to. I forgave where I could. And I forgave myself. That was the hardest part. I used to carry guilt like armor, thinking it made me humble. But guilt isn't humility. It's a chain. And once I let it go, I realized forgiveness isn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about refusing to let it own you anymore. I stopped trying to be someone. I started trying to be real, to live with integrity even when no one was watching. That, to me, is success now, being able to look in the mirror and not see a role, not see an image, but a soul that's finally honest. Faith didn't erase the pain or the mistakes. It didn't take away the struggles, but it gave me something I'd never had before, strength to walk through the fire without losing myself. I used to think peace meant the absence of storms. Now I know it means having an anchor in the middle of them. Every day, I try to live slower, love deeper, and speak kinder. I'm not perfect, I never will be, but I've learned that life isn't about perfection, it's about direction. And I'm finally walking towards something true. I don't need the world to remember my name. I don't need another award or headline. What I need, what I cherish, is the quiet certainty that I'm where I'm meant to be. Because I didn't find peace when the world celebrated me, I found peace when I remembered God. If you've listened this far, maybe it's because something in my story sounds familiar. Maybe you've been running to chasing success, validation, or peace in all the wrong places. I know what that feels like. I've been there. But let me tell you this, no amount of fame, money, or applause will ever fill the emptiness that only faith can reach. I learned that the hard way. I lost almost everything before I finally found what mattered. And when I did, I realized I hadn't really lost at all. I'd just been stripped down to my soul, to the part of me God was waiting to rebuild. If you're standing at that edge, wondering if there's more to life than what you see there is, if you think you've gone too far, you haven't. Grace reaches farther than failure ever could. I'm not telling you to be perfect. I'm telling you to be honest, to stop running, to look inward and upward, because the greatest comeback isn't about being remembered by the world. It's about remembering who you are and who made you. Because the greatest comeback isn't fame, it's faith